Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's Swissman 15, and welcome back to another Factions In-Depth episode. Unfortunately, I don't have anyone with me today, but we are going to do the Timurids. It's just me, you, and the Timurids. Mostly because I want to get a video out, and this is the longer overdue to get a Factions In-Depth video out again, and I couldn't get anyone to join me. And also, I think just maybe, since the Timurids are not as well known as other factions, that it might be easier to do them without anyone else. Perhaps Mana Azaria would have been a good choice, but he already was in one, and we don't want to give him favoritism having been two. So today it's just you, me, and the Timurids. So let's start off, as always, with the Cavalry. Of course, we can start off with the Bodyguard. Of course, it's pretty standard. It's just like Western Bodyguard, except it has a lower charge, so overall worse, but I think it is cheaper. Wait, 860 here. We can go check that real quick. Yeah, by 10 florins, you save 10 florins for that bodyguard, I suppose. And, they do have maces also, as the bodyguard, so they have a lot more melee capability than the Western bodyguard, only inferior to, like, that of the Turkish or Moorish bodyguard, which also have maces as well. I don't think the Egyptian one does. I'm not sure about that. Oh wait, this is the Mongols. Haha, let's go back to Timurids. Whoops, and then for the other cav, of course, you have the basic Khan's Guard. Thing about the Khan's Guard is it can't get defensive upgrades. It's 1317 just like Western cav, but of course lower charge again. And it has maces, which is good for the melee, but it can't get a defensive upgrades, making it inferior to Teutonic Knights in pretty much every way, considering they cost the same amount and can't get defensive upgrades and lower charge and everything. And it's a real disappointment for the Mongols, since they're supposed to have like the best cav in the game. But that's in theory, but not in practice. But if you think about the expansions, especially for the Mongols and Timurids, even though the Timurids can't be played in multiplayer, but the Mongols can only in Teutonic, their cav is really actually good, because armor upgrades are very expensive, and they can't get them anyway, and they have the armor piercing and cavs actually balanced, and they actually have infantry that can stand up to things. But that's just my expansions rant for now. For the other cav that's available to the Timurids, they don't have the light cav that is so excellent of the ordinary Mongols, but they do continue to have the Mongol heavy lancers. Standard cav 13, 14, 6, so just subpar in melee. Can get the attack upgrade, and I think armor. Let's just check that. Yes, I can get armor, so it can get up to 14, 15 with maces, so it is a good backup unit, but it is costly, 850 for it. So a fully upgraded one to have it really capable is over 1,000, so it's a really, really expensive unit. And the Timurids are a very expensive faction overall, but we're going to get into something else that makes it probably the best hybrid faction available. Because they have these archers right here, and this missile unit. These three units are probably the creme de la creme of the Timurids. Basically, you have the Sabadar Militia, which is 915 with a missile attack of 9, of course not armor piercing, with a composite bow, so it's not that very good at shooting. It won't stand up to crossbows and melee, at least in vanilla. It would in another thing, and I don't know what all this beeping is, but it's my phone and I'm very angry. I don't know if you heard it. But anyway, so it's 915, and they do have axes, so they are armor piercing. They are pretty much better overall than, at least in a melee, than like Imperial Knights, because they have good morale. They have a little bit less fighting capability, but overall they do stand up more and they can shoot, which is wonderful. They are a bit costly though, especially with upgrades, but you can always complement them with the dismounted heavy archers. They also have an armor piercing attack for melee. They have maces. They're 9 and 12 and 4, so they're a little bit less in stats, but still very good. Cheaper too by just 70 florins. Same amount of shooting, so you can mix these two together and have a massive arrow wall to pound the enemy infantry and then actually hold up in the melee fight. But of course, you need other things with you, because you can't just have archers, especially for any build. Since you do need meat shields, you might want the Turkish archers or some peasant archers, even though they will be decimated, but something to maybe hold off the crossmen and keep these guys from the actual skirmish, because you will not be, you don't want to waste them since they are very costly, and you don't want to lose them to archer fire. So that's just my suggestion when using them. I have to use the Timurids in vanilla more and see if I can actually cause victories with them or actually use them well. Manazeri has used them quite well in the past, but we'll see about that if it continues to do so. Anyway, then we also have the Afghan Javelin Men, a wonderful unit. It's still pretty costly, 640, so these are all very expensive units, mind you, especially with the Cav. But it has also 1314, so not as good as any other infantry. It doesn't have armor piercing, but those are good stats for a skirmish unit and good morale and good stamina, along with effective against armor missile 10 with its javelins, which is wonderful. You can have it on the back of your lines, and they will decimate. I mean decimate enemy infantry. I've seen them in action. Now, keep in mind that these 3 units are extraordinarily useful inside of a siege battle because they can shoot with the good angles with the 2 bowmen here. They have wonderful angles against walls and everything. They don't need the straight line that the crossbows do, so they can actually go a long way and actually prove to be just as effective as crossbows in a siege battle, which is wonderful. And then you could also have your Afghan Javelin supporting your allied troops or other things behind with their massive skirmish capability, and their javelins will just tear apart the enemy infantry. And while we're talking about sieges and just harassing enemy infantry from afar, you can always bring Nafatoons, just like any other Eastern faction besides the Moors. They have them, so they're still good. You know, they cause the routes. They're pretty basic flaming pots. You can't beat them. Very cheap. Don't know what else to say about that, but I just love the Nafatoons. Love them. Now, of course, there are the infamous elephants that do belong to the Timurids. You don't see them often because they're often banned. I mean, I think I even banned them myself because they're just annoying to fight. They're not unbeatable, but it's just annoying and not fun, so I just don't want to deal with it every time someone's be like, hey, I can bring elephants. It's fun for you because you have to use the elephants. Everyone else is like, alright, I gotta spend half an hour killing these guys and whatever. But if you're going to use them well. Don't overrun your own infantry. It's going to just be a waste. You can only get one, really, because they are so expensive. If you get both, what is that? See, it's almost 5,000 just to get 2 elephants. They are probably worth the money and well worth it, especially the elephant artillery, which probably route everything in its path. It's kind of excessive. A charge of 9, wow. And of course, they both have gun units. The elephant artillery have the cannons on top, and these elephants standard have gunmen on top, so they can actually shoot from afar and everything. I don't know, do they have a special attack? Yeah, I guess. And by the way, they can run amok. It even says in there, and that's really bad because it can decimate your own lines as well as the enemies and or your allies if you're in a team battle. And I highly don't suggest you bring them in a siege because you'll just end up running over your own net at some point or something. They will die. They are meant for field battles if you can even get a chance to use them. Just throwing that out there. If you go into the infantry, there's not much to say about the actual infantry of the Timurids, especially in vanilla. You just have the dismounted heavy lancers. They are extremely subpar for their cost, costing just as much as, or just almost as much as dismounted field knights, and performing abysmally. They got a better charge, but it's not really worth it. Maybe you'll use them just as anti-cav, I'm not sure. Then of course you got the Haldir militia. They are subpar, especially with the two-handed glitch and the lack of any good stats besides this. No good morale, no good stamina. I do not recommend. If you're going to have infantry, make it your hybrid units right here. They are going to serve you well. And not to say that the Timurids are a great faction with the hybrid units. They are probably subpar still with them, at least in vanilla, because it's just not made for them. But it is a fun challenge to try and use them, so I highly recommend you try and use them every now and then, and probably offer some people a good surprise that you can actually use them well if you know what you're doing. And just the final note that I have to say about them is probably the rocket launcher. It is very expensive, 1,100 florins, but I've seen it used by like Kipicom in the past, even though I blocked him now because I don't want to talk to him anymore. But it is very good when you get it on a good place in the siege, maybe on a hill in a fortress on defense. You can cover an entire alley with that, and one volley could really take out an entire unit, more or less, probably down to like 20. It really decimates them and can cause a lot of fear. So I definitely want to try using the Mongols in a siege in Manila quite soon. I think it would be very entertaining and a bit of a challenge, at least if I have an ally who can have heavy infantry to support my lack of melee troops or quality melee troops until, because you want to use the ammunition on these guys first before you suffer them or send them into a melee, because then it's just you're wasting their potential, because they're decent in the melee, but they're not excellent. They're decent, but the part that makes them really good is the fact that they can do both, and they can both do adequately well, especially in a siege. So just throwing it out there, it's very important for you to understand. So try out the Timurids. Tell me what you guys think. Also, anything you think I might have missed about them. I think I got pretty much the whole synopsis. I did skip over these horse archers because I generally suck at using horse archers. But if you do love horse archers, the Mongol heavy archers, they cost a butt ton. They don't have good range because they'll just be shot to pieces by crossbows or anything else. And their stats are subpar for a melee, but you can always try using them. I guess they do have armor-piercing attacks, so if you really want to go out and use horse archers, follow Captain Visible's horse archer series, and you can probably learn how to use them much better than I could even hope to. Then the Turkomans and Turkish horse archers as well. They are both pretty fast, and they're very good harassing, especially for early period battles. So if you're ever in the early period, since there's not a lot of long period archers and no long missile archers and no long missile crossbows, you can definitely use them to get a massive harass on the enemy. In fact, the early period units are pretty good for the Timurids. You got the dismounted heavy archers, you got the Afghan javelin men, you got crap infantry, but you got the Nafatoon still, so you can always be relying on them. So just try them out. Wow, the cav is actually pretty abysmal for melee, because these are high period cav, unfortunately. Don't get to use them in melee. I guess the Mongol horse archers, they're all, so... Or maybe you have to wait really long for that. I'm not sure how that works. But they are a decent early period faction, so definitely try that out. So thank you all for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Goodbye, my friends.